Ducky Ducky! just before we begin. Before we press record on that, Ali said this is going to be a free-flowing thing on India, just stick to the facts, that's what the audience likes. And I just referenced Herman Cain from the 2012 election, who started every single rally that he was at apparently by yelling, Ducky Ducky! And everyone would get into it because it was a Herman Cain rally. So, we are talking about...
That's a good segue. We have been discussing Herman Cain for the past half an hour.
And nothing to do with India. This is just as enlightening as it will be for you. We're discussing India and its relation with the world today on Holsworthy Live, 5th episode, where I believe Mislav has been here for 2 of the 5 episodes. So yeah, Ali, come on. Tell us all about it, and also who the current leader is, because I know one thing about him, which is, and it was you that told me, which is incredible. This guy is responsible for massacring 30,000 Muslims.
Okay.
You explain it.
It's interesting. It was 2000, and he was the chief minister of a state that had basically Hindu-Muslim riots.
So it's the Premier. So
the Premier,
in all of my Friendly Geordies videos where I'm always saying, Mike Baird is the most insane, ruthless, evil leader. Like, similar ballpark, but I think he takes a gold and Mike Baird takes a very close hair nose silver medal.
This episode isn't actually about the monstrosity of this man. He's like, okay, he's a normal politician who will go to any stretch to get his agenda passed or done in any which way. So it's basically, there are no rules when it comes to politics. But okay, so the current Prime Minister of India is Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, but we should, like, before explaining what this guy is up to, a bit of history to understand what he's doing and why he's doing this. So, India is one country, but it's not technically one country. At least it's not supposed to be one country, in a sense that it comprises of many different ethnicities, all of whom have different languages, different cultures, and work pretty much autonomously in themselves. So
it wouldn't work if they were just a bunch of different states like Europe.
Yeah, they are that though. They are like, India is a Europe instead of it being like Britain or France. So it's a collection of different things, which is where...
Wow, the first European Union.
Yeah, it's a republic, but it works more like a federation. So this has been India's issue from the beginning, which is these disparate communities that always find it difficult to work with each other. And this has been because they were all independent kingdoms. Even before the British occupied India, they were all independent kingdoms that were constantly either fighting each other or invaded by others. So they all formed like these really protected shells of communities. And now that it has become a republic, that sort of... there's a hangover of that. In fact,
I thought it was just India versus Pakistan, but it is India versus India.
That's what I'm going to say. So it is India versus India, which is why it's being presented as India versus Pakistan in order to unify India a bit more.
Oh,
yeah,
clever little devil. Even though apparently I hear that he's not that clever of a politician.
Dude, he's pretty clever. He's a good politician in a sinister way.
But where would you rank him in terms of cleverness? Would he be a Bill Clinton or a George Herbert Walker Bush? Because, you know, both of them were like sort of... yeah, actually that was a terrible comparison, I think. I think they're about as good as one another, except for, you know, on different spectrums of politics. But they seem to be there. They're both, yeah, you were there, that's great. We'll put you in the history books.
Think of Ronald Reagan in terms of his personality, his politics and everything, but with Bill Clinton's mind. Or even better,
that's great. Excellent personality. All right.
Okay, maybe even better. Ronald Reagan's personality with Paul Keating's mind.
Really?
I would say so. This guy's pretty smart. He just uses it
Nixon
in a different way.
with charisma?
So, okay.
Drama reference for everybody sitting at home. You used to Simpsons ones here, aren't you? No, it's a different channel. That's pretty much all oh yeah, and maybe just Hypno too. Me. Alright, anyway.
Okay, so India has so because of these different sort of individual kingdoms, their politics resonates that. So these states pretty much work semi-autonomously in a sense, and the whole any Indian state that wants to get rid of the enormous inequality and poverty needs to consolidate these states in order to make a unified economic policy that can be attractive for everything, foreign direct investment, pretty much anything. So it would be like, I'll give you an example. So if there's some goods that are traveling from one state of India to another, they have to stop at the border. This sounds ridiculous, but this happens. They have to stop at the border, pay an import duty for that state with enormous amounts of paperwork. So it's a horrible...
What is it with India and paperwork? I hear this about everything. It was, I want to adopt a child off the street. Okay, we're going to have to fill out 70,000 different forms. Why? It's some beggar on the street. You don't give a shit about them. Just let him pick them up.
That's basically because of... so after India's independence, they had their leader, Nehru, was more aligned to the Soviet Union. So he wanted to build like a sort of a protectionist state, and as a result, there was a huge bureaucracy that was created, and that bureaucracy depended on unionizing, licensing, and all of that relates to a lot of paperwork. And so that has been a drag. So they had like a watershed moment in the early 90s. What happened was India basically went into a crisis because of the Kuwait and Iraq war. Oil prices went up, and because India imports most of its energy, their bills went to the extent where the state wasn't viable. So they had to take a huge loan from IMF, and as a result of its austerity, IMF instructed them to open up their economy, which did wonders. So that's when India started shining. Remember back in the day, India used to be like this place of snake... what are those?
Snake charmers.
Snake charmers. And basically that was it. And then all of a sudden...
What? The whole economy was snake charmers?
No, not the whole economy. But the idea of India was pretty much just that. It was just massively poor. And without any... because of its protectionist policies, foreign companies weren't set. So there was no Coca-Cola, there was no McDonald's. They always had their own thing. They had their own Coca-Cola, which was called Thumbs Up, just to protect their own industry. But
God, 5,000 years of dal. Could you do it?
5,000.
Surely you'd want a Coke.
Yeah, and they did, and they got really happy when they did get Coke. So after 90s, their economy started. Once they opened up, they had they had way more money coming in. They were making a lot more money, and as a result, there was this middle class that started growing to this point where that middle class gained enough power in society that they elected their own leader, which was called Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Really? So he's a monster of the middle class?
Yeah, he's definitely the middle class. You can compare him to like Turkey's Erdogan. Where like it's a...
Which I'm sure that we all are at home. We're all very familiar with President Erdogan.
So, well, often at times, which I've noticed in Western countries, the concept is that the middle class is free, it's liberating. In my personal experience, especially within the third world, the middle class is the most monstrous and autocratic class there can be. What they do is they're open to trade and foreign relations, but they're highly they're very nationalistic and protectionist of their own culture.
It reminds me a lot of George Carlin explaining the role of the middle class in the US, where he said that the middle class is there to do all of the dirty work of pushing buttons and writing forms that the wealthy doesn't want to do. And so they basically do nothing and reap most of the reward. And then the poor is there just to scare the shit out of the middle class. Do you think that's how it works in a developing country?
Classic Carlin. It doesn't work exactly the same way, but one can always appreciate that man.
So that doesn't apply to you, but still very, very good observation, I guess.
Excellent. Shout out to George Carlin.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
You two-pack of comedy.
He is the two-pack of comedy.
Surely, right?
He is the two-pack.
Who does that make Biggie then? Richard Pryor?
That's what I was just gonna say. Richard Pryor has to be Biggie of comedy. Yeah.
That's incredible. Damn, Biggie must be feeling good about that in heaven, that he's related to the black guy. Well, Tupac would hate that.
Yes. Okay, so back to so the Prime Minister, who is the personification of this new bourgeois middle class that is now essentially arguing that this economy is not working very well for them, which they have way more potential, and they're restricted by all of these different states basically in fighting and not letting legislation pass. So Modi's primary objective is to consolidate them. And this is where his image of being this anti-Muslim or this sort of dictator autocrat comes from. So in order to consolidate the Indian state altogether, they need to form some sort of a common ideology. That's how most societies progress. If you think of Europe, it's much easier for a France to achieve excellence because it has a unified common culture and ideology. Imagine if you were trying to do that with the whole of Europe.
Yeah, and
How
so far all they've got
difficult
is a
would that be?
circle of stars. China's pretty much got that. What are you at?
Yeah, so it's really difficult. It's hard to convince the French and the German and also the Slovak on the same page. So, and the only way they can do it is by reinforcing a common ideology, even if it is fabricated. In Europe's instance, they try to do that with, having these Western values, and often at times in contradiction to Middle Eastern values, in order to reinforce their own identity. Does that make sense? So, like, being French is not just about a pool of a culture, but it's also not being German. That's also part of the identity.
I think the way that we could all simplify this is the easiest way to unite a nation is to just start hating on Muslims.
Yes, and that's essentially what Modi is trying to do. What he's trying to do is, like, the 80 to 85% of the Indian population is Hindu. That is a huge chunk. And if we can, the way I guess he thinks of it is, like, if we can rally these people under a common ideology, which they refer to as Hindutva, we can transform the economy. We can make people stop fighting each other. We can fight the Pakistanis, and we can make them the enemy, and that way we can consolidate power here.
That's amazing. Who invented this idea?
It's been
Just making every political campaign on the right these days seems to be fought from India to Europe to the US to here is just fuck Muslims. That's the campaign slogan of it, and it seems to work everywhere. Who invented this first, and who's like the brainchild that's passing all of this information out? It's
almost being on a scale, because he doesn't, and Prime Minister Modi recognizes he doesn't want to escalate his issues with Pakistan to the extent where there is a full-scale war, because that will ruin all his idea of consolidating the economy, because foreign direct investment will just evaporate as soon as people find out that this place could go into war. So he doesn't want to reach that stage, but in order to solidify his own government, he needs to keep the temperature at a certain level where it doesn't, if it's a pot, he wants to keep it boiling, but he doesn't want the water to come out. So he wants to keep it at that stage, and hopefully through that he thinks that he's been successful. He's a very, very popular leader. India always, imagine if every Australian government was a hung parliament. India was in a situation like that, where it wasn't a hung parliament, but there were always these coalitions that would form government. So no individual party had enough power to move legislation in any significant way. This government is still not like an absolute majority, but is way better than what it was. And they think that that's perhaps because of this nationalistic ideology that Prime Minister Modi and his government is propagating. So they want to hold on to that. They have some pretty real issues that they need to deal with. The import duty, so they need to basically reduce these within the country tariffs. They need to become energy sufficient, which means that they want to get nuclear power as one of the main resources to get energy. And in most countries, the laws are, if there's a nuclear disaster, the people that were managing that nuclear power plant are held responsible rather than the suppliers. But in India, it's actually the suppliers that will be held responsible. So that means that most of the nuclear companies that can invest don't end up investing. And Modi cannot change that legislation without getting not only the parliament to pass the bill, but also each state government to pass the bill. So that's a monumental task. And because of this fragmented country, he can't do that. So that's why he wants to bring in this nationalistic fervor, so he can convince everyone that let's all work for India. And if that means fuck the Muslims, then whatever. It's
incredible.
Opportunity cost.
It's like the Chinese, a wise race. You know how they've just got for the same symbol, everybody always talks about this. Crisis and opportunity is the same symbol in Chinese. That's actually a legitimate phenomenon that has happened throughout all of history, which is that in the midst of a crisis, good leaders have recognized that society is more flexible when people panicking, and then they can push an agenda forward. Naomi Klein's shock doctrine is a really good example of that. So when there was the Hurricane Katrina that hit Louisiana, then all the Republicans thought, man, this is a great opportunity to privatise the schooling system. And they did. They had to have private schools statewide pretty much in Louisiana at this point. So it's like they said that good leaders throughout history just keep this perpetual idea of crisis in the psyche of the nation, and then they're able to bend the rules better as a result.
That's what he's trying to do. So he makes everything. So in fact, he's done a pretty revolutionary thing, which is so India is, as a result of these bureaucratic inefficiencies, there's a huge informal economy, way bigger than anyone can even imagine in Western world, and that is basically a cash economy. Modi has basically decided and has announced that the 500 and 1,000 bills are not going to work anymore. As in they're basically just worthless now. So this whole informal economy is panicking. and because of this economy, a lot of people that aren't... So he says that it's an effort to combat corruption. And as a result, and that's why he's doing it. But it's obviously a lot of corrupt people will have a lot of cash with them, but they could buy gold, and but there's a lot of people. 85% of the cash in the country that was circulating was the 501,000 bill. It's an insane. I don't even know how this is going to turn out. Frankly, I think it's a good experiment, but it's definitely...
Really? So no one knows what's going to happen?
Well, a lot of people are predicting what's going to happen. I'm saying I don't exactly know, because I do like that idea.
Yes. It's a very romantic bet. Much like in Vegas when somebody comes in and goes, I wager my entire oil fortune on this next roulette roll. But he's gone one step more epic than that. I wager the subcontinent of India.
Yeah. It's
crazy.
Yeah.
Who's ever made a bigger bet than that?
It's actually...
Napoleon? Europe's not that big.
It's insane how this I was reading a the CEO of a Shanghai bank commenting on, he's like, when I read that news story, I thought it was like the fake news story that Obama was talking about the whole time. But this time it was real. It was like, I couldn't believe what was happening. It's like the 85% of the cash in the market is just all of a sudden irrelevant. And this is in a country with about 75% rural population that have never really seen an ATM machine. So like, they were pretty much depending on cash. So now he's just saying that we want to make it into a digital economy, but that's sort of without the Industrial Revolution in between. So
that's insane! What a visionary! That is a feudal lord saying, I want the net.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what, I don't know how that's going to, but these are all efforts to make some radical moves to change this country. Because India has a huge potential. It's 1.2 billion, China's 1.3 billion, but what's interesting is India's demographic, where most of the country is young. China has a huge problem where most of their population is aging now. India has just got a huge bulge, so they could potentially take off. But it's easier said than done, and it's what is required is not always popular and politically correct.
Damn!
It's like,
so in the end, you actually have a lot of respect for the current Indian Prime Minister,
no,
whose name I clearly know as I haven't mentioned.
I don't have respect for any politician that's basically sort of a, because he's a dubious character. he has no ethics, I feel, in this whole game. You can respect it to an extent where he's like, you know, determined to get what he wants, but it's also like, man, if we can't expect our representatives to be ethical, then who the hell is going to be ethical?
Good point, actually. So he's like 100% vision, 0% heart.
Yeah, he's got no heart. At least maybe.
That's great. Imagine if
mention
one day, like when he just gets inaugurated for the second time, he just quickly takes his face off and it's a robot.
Yeah, just like, psych. I should mention
just quick enough because he's a robot, so he can do it extremely fast for every conspiracy side on the planet to go nuts. But not enough for anyone to believe it.
Yeah. And like I did want to mention that I am from Pakistan, so I clearly have a bias here. So
no, but your bias seems to sort of be in favour of him because you give me a fairly fair analysis of it.
Not,
and you say you're giving him a lot of credit for a Pakistani man. And your rivalry with Pakistan is not like Australia v New Zealand, where it's kind of just like New Zealand saying that like you guys are just a bunch of fuckwits and like, yeah, but we don't care. Like you're just 4 million people. You're like half of New South Wales.
It's a lot more hardcore than that. It's more like 3 wars and constant
a really intense cricket rivalry.
And not just cricket, dude. There was a lot of Pakistani actors that were now acting in Bollywood movies, and like the fucking government just said, "No, fuck off, pack your bags."
Really?
It's fucking insane. Yeah, they're like, so that tells you the temperature that country is at. So yeah, it's quite like, these are like, okay, how can you support that?
That's amazing. Ali, you've got to write a book about it, which has a really clear shot of one of those saucepans that's made of glass, and it is sort of steam, it's like simmering over the top of it, and it's called 101 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. It's like during the peak of Cold War, America just saying all the Russians in their industry to fuck off.
Yeah!
It's actually that crazy. But yeah, so all of this is an attempt to, again, consolidate his country. It's playing with fire. It's interesting and it can work, but you can get burnt real bad.
I think that, who are you more interested in at the moment? Because you seem to have a soft spot for China, and also, because you're Pakistani, it's not as soft, but it's still a relative soft spot for India for a Pakistani man. Which one do you think is more interesting?
Well, India probably is more interesting because India is pretty much identical to Pakistan. It's just a version 2.0, as my brother says. It's just an advanced version of the same software.
That's right.
So
his brother has the best example of it. He's saying that Pakistan is Windows 95 and India is Windows 98 today. and they're sitting there just on the shelf in Office Works going, "Sucked in, we're Windows 98, we beat Windows 95." And Pakistan knows it's Windows 95. And it's like, yeah, we know, but dude, Windows 98 is still 20 years old.
Yeah. Actually, China is like now Vista, so it's still. What's the latest one? I don't even know. I've lost the count.
Is it Windows 10?
Yes, actually, yes, it might.
Is it?
I think so.
I couldn't imagine they're on to
Windows 10.
11, what with their technology and all.
Yeah.
Which is what we'll be discussing in another Holsworthy live episode. I think that pretty much sums it up. We'll see you next week, maybe with Miss Love. To people who keep writing in the comment sections, Miss Love or Riot, I think it's time to start rioting. I'm just taking this very seriously at all. See you next week.